Hi there. In this episode, Synth lore, the Roland D-70. I'm going to discuss my feelings about the TITANIC D-70. Actually, I mean the amazing Roland D-70 Super LA synthesizer, including some interesting history and stories. There wasn't going to be a quiz for this episode. I was just going to play you some sounds, but there will be a quiz. You'll see why later. I'll also go over all of the specs, features, and some major design defects. Let's start with the timeline. The Yamaha DX7 was released in 1983, and it got the ball rolling with lusted-after digital synths. Yes, there were others, but the DX7 was prolific. The Roland D-50 was released in 1987, the same year as the Yamaha DX7 2 Series. FM was still very popular, but the D-50 became highly successful, selling about 200,000 units. In 1988, Korg released the best-selling 61-note workstation of all time, the M1. It sold about 250,000 units. All the major manufacturers, except for Korg, were heavily involved with many sampling products to combat FM and the M1. The Roland D-70 was released in 1990, the same year as the Korg Wavestation. The D-70 was thought by many to be the successor to the venerable D-50. It has a larger 76-note keyboard with velocity and aftertouch, a larger screen, some cool filter options, and plenty of controls. Let's talk about the important D-70 specifications. The sound engine is 30 voices of what Roland calls advanced LA synthesis. From what I have read and remember, it's based more on the U220 synth engine than the D-50, and possibly being somewhat of a hybrid. I remember one person saying that it would read U220 PCM cards, but I don't know if that is true. When I purchased mine used, it had two U110 cards inserted, but it doesn't appear to read them. It is 6-part multi-timbral with 5 instrument parts and 1 percussion part. It has low pass, high pass, and band pass time variant filters. It has reverb, delay, chorus, and flanger effects. 1 system setup, 10 user sets, 64 performances, 128 patches, 128 tones, and 1 rhythm set mapped across all 76 notes. With the RAM card, you can have another set of all of these, except for the original tones, of course. For control, it offers 57 buttons, 7 sliders, 1 alpha dial that kind of clicks, and 1 combo bender mod joystick over here. On the back panel, you get a 1/4-inch stereo headphone output, 4 1/4-inch outputs, 2 PCM card slots, 3 pedal inputs, 1 which is for expression pedal, 1 for pedal switch, and a hold pedal. MIDI in, out, and through on standard 5-pin DIN connectors. A contrast potentiometer for the display, and it's a little larger than most. A 3-position memory switch. A RAM card slot, and that's in addition to the 2 other PCM card slots. A power button, and a permanently attached power cable. On the surface, everything looks pretty good. You have plenty of controls, a big display, more keys than your typical 61-note synth. So why didn't it sell? Before I get to that, when I moved to California, a person had just bought a brand new D-70 in 1991, which was the year I moved here. He brought it over to my place and demoed it for me. I thought it sounded great. I didn't really think much about the D-70 again until circa 2013, when I bought one really cheap off of eBay, and by cheap I mean it was something like $150. I knew it had problems, most notably dead keys. I didn't know how to fix it back then, so I tried my best, I failed, didn't make it any worse, and I resold it. A couple of years later, I purchased another one. This time it was in mint condition and fully functional. I purchased it because of my memory of how good it sounded. And at the time, I didn't own a 76 key, non-weighted keyboard. I thought buying the D-70 would kill two birds with one stone. I'd get the great sounds of a D-50 and a larger 76-note keyboard for playing synth licks. After I got it and poured through the sounds, I realized it didn't sound as good as a D-50. The memory I had of it sounding great was accurate, but only accurate for 1991. It was now 22 years later, and it was not so great anymore. I had purchased some significantly better technology for my studio over that period of time, and the D-70 was a sentimental purchase and not a practical one. Let's get back to the question of why it didn't sell. It doesn't sound bad, but it doesn't sound better than a D-50. The best thing I could say is that it sounds like a D-50, but it's not as good as a D-50. Remember, this was 3 years after the release of the D-50 that the D-70 came out. And perhaps Roland felt like they had to release a follow-up to the highly successful D-50. Probably sales by that time of the D-50 were starting to wane. At that time, Korg had its T-Series and Yamaha had the SY-77. A year later, Yamaha released the SY-99. The competition were selling workstations. The Roland D-70 is just a plain synthesizer / rompler. It was like they were Oliver Twist with their begging bowl going, "Oh, please, public, we want more of your money." But they weren't offering any more to their customers. I believe Roland named the D-70 to ride on the coattails of the D-50. And it was a good marketing ploy. Unfortunately, it wasn't a better D-50 or even a D-50. And the name alone wasn't enough to ensure decent sales. Next, why did I place the Titanic moniker on the D-70 at the start of this episode? Kind of a Freudian slip, but not really. Buckle up. It's a fact that the D-70 has an underpowered CPU, and under certain circumstances, the CPU can be overwhelmed and get bogged down. This causes two issues. First, the LFO can slow down, and it's audibly noticeable. Number two, if MIDI data, such as sequencer data, is being received at a high rate, say with a lot of controller information, the unit can become overwhelmed and data can get lost. It can cause stuck notes or other unpredictable behavior. Next, you may have heard of the red glue issue. This is just well known now. The keys are semi-weighted. When the weights were glued into the underside of the keys, a red glue was used. Over time, the glue can revert back to a liquid mush. It's not so much of a problem for the white keys because they extend over the metal case. For the black keys, however, it's a major problem. Those keys are right over the key mechanism. If they start to ooze the red glue, it can mess up all the mechanism and the contacts. It creates a real mess, and it's a challenging repair. Next, from my experience, keys fail with a high degree of regularity on the D-70. What I mean is that you press a key and it makes no sound. This isn't because the sound engine has failed, it's because of two other problems. Number one, the key sensor has failed and the sound engine didn't get a key press message from the sensor. The D-70 uses a system employed by many keyboards, and rather than try to explain it, I'm just going to show the key sensors on the screen. I don't understand why they seem to fail more often on the D-70. I know that my QS6 and possibly my QS7 both have similar sensors, but they are still working well. Dust and other crud can enter into those sensors and prevent triggering of a sound when a key is pressed. It's a fairly easy cleaning process to fix them that requires tear down of the D-70 and takes about 3 hours. Second, the micro tracings that run from the contacts to the circuit board can become broken. They are incredibly small and fragile and run through or across a piece of clear plastic. When they break, some folks run jumper wires to re-enable the connection, but it's a tedious repair that requires some skill, both troubleshooting and soldering. Sometimes the breaks are impossible to see with the naked eye, and you can spend hours continuity testing the trace runs, trying to locate the bad traces. Also, over time, you may need to go back and add more jumper wires. Next, you may have seen an episode where I talked about the Yamaha TX16W having an operating system programmed by a dyslexic hamster. The operating system on the D-70 was programmed by that hamster after losing his eyesight and succumbing to dementia. The D-70 is enigmatic, like a Rubik's Cube that keeps changing on you as you're trying to work on it. Because of this, and that I don't use it on tracks very much, I admit I've never put in the time learning the D-70. I've gone through the sounds, but I never learned the operating system. Usually 2 minutes with a new keyboard, and I can figure out some basic navigation, how to call up sounds, how to get to parameters, how to go in and change a MIDI channel and turn local on and off. Not so with the D-70. You can pore over the manual, press buttons, and still feel like you're in a maze located in a fog bank. The D-70 was rushed to market, and it shows. Lastly, the display. It's a nice display for the time. All LCD backlights fail, but the D-70 backlight seems to defy the odds with frequent failure, and disassembling this keyboard is a freaking nightmare. Similar to the Korg WaveStation keyboard, you have to dig through the underside of the keyboard, removing circuit boards to get to the display. There is also an audible whine from the display. I'm going to turn it on so you can hear that. Kind of how I'm whining right now. Hopefully you can hear that whine. Now, I knew this before acquiring the D-70, and I still purchased it. Meaning I knew all these things, I mean I knew all these problems. I just wanted one. The fact that they didn't sell well could be a good thing. They are fairly rare. You don't see a lot for sale, and they have been going up in price, especially ones in really nice condition, like the one I have. The D-70 is known for having decent EP, organ, and bass sounds. On this more positive note, let's play some sounds. Okay, I was going to play the sounds from the D-70, but almost every key below what is physically middle C, I know you can shift the keyboard pitch, but just about every key below middle C is not working. So there's what's middle C on this. Only 2 keys are working below middle C. So I am going to do a quiz after all, and I'll compare the D-70 to, I think, the Alesis QS series, because I think that's about the closest. I opened up the machine prior to this episode, which is where all the pictures came from that I'm showing you in this episode. I cleaned the contacts for the non-working keys, but it didn't help. They actually looked immaculate, so that's 3 hours of my life I won't get back. I believe several of the micro tracings are broken, and I may go back in and try to repair them. As I previously stated, I've never used the D-70 on a track. I don't even use it as a controller because I have the Alesis QS7 that has 76 keys, and I often use it or my DX7 2FD for ripping synth lead lines. This is probably because their operating systems are easier to navigate, and I couldn't use the D-70 now anyway because almost half the keys are dead. I used to own 2 Roland D550s, which are the rack mount version of the D50, and I never used them on any tracks either. I still have one and it's waiting to be repaired. The D-70 was okay for 1991, but it's not that useful today. It does take up studio space, and I might have previously thought that I could never sell it, but I'm starting to soften my position on that. I'll probably hold on to it just in case it becomes valuable as a rare collector's keyboard. They're very rare. Right now, you can't find many of them for sale. If it had come out a year earlier, we could call it an 80s synth, and I really do think that would give it a lot more appeal to some folks. Good to excellent Roland D50s sell in the $650 to $750 range. D70s sell at a similar price, but where you will find 35 D50s for sale on Reverb, you're lucky to find even one D70. You'll also find 1 or 2 D70s at a low price with key problems, which will be attributable to the glue issue, contacts, micro tracings, or some combination of these issues. Owning a D70 is like owning a Formula One race car. It needs constant maintenance, and you don't get the performance of a Formula One race car from it. A YouTuber named Brad THX has a great video where he tears down a D70 to fix issues. There are some simple key contact repair issues that don't require heavy-duty electronic skills like soldering or using an ESR tester or a multimeter. They just require good teardown skills, finesse, and a methodical approach. Others need a fully qualified tech, and it's impossible to tell if the really cheap unit that you're buying off of Reverb will require low skill or high skill to repair. I don't recommend buying a D70 because it's not a matter of will you have problems. It's just a matter of when will you have problems. A D50 would be a much better choice if you're interested in this kind of sound. From friends that have owned the D50, they appear to be pretty reliable. I can still use my D70 as a sound module because it receives MIDI fine, except for the aforementioned problems, but it's probably just going to sit in my rack for the rest of my life. One last thing before I close. When hardware fails like the D70 has done to me, it gets me thinking that I want to sell most of my hardware keyboards. I've said in many videos that they are not my workhorses. They were in the 80s and 90s, but not anymore. It's nostalgia and sentimentality that keeps me holding on to them. If I were to sell them, it would free up valuable space in my studio and simplify my setup. I could also just put them in the attic, or I could put them under a bed, and I'm thinking I just might do that. The D70, the Poly 800, the QS6, they could go right now, and that's one less rack of crap for me to have to deal with. But they're like little puppies, and I love them. Still, that said, if one more of my ancient synths fails me, it's going in the Woodchipper. Hopefully I haven't wasted your time. Take care, and I'll be back in another episode soon.